Hello, Mr. Gigabytes here, and today we're doing part one of a multi-part Commodore 64 restoration. And in this particular part, we're going to be focusing primarily on the keyboard. This Commodore was one that I received from a pawn shop just out about an hour north of town, and I got a Commodore 64, a VIC-20, and some other things. I've done an inspection on it. Everything looks good, but the Commodore is missing a key. It was missing a power supply, so I ordered a power supply. You'll see that later. And it needed very little cleanup. It was a very clean system, but of course it's missing the 0 key, which I also ordered. I'll have links for any of that in the video description. But what I'm doing now is I'm going to work on the keyboard. And I need to work on I have to remove the keyboard in order to replace the keys. And of course, the keyboard was one of the pieces I never, the keyboard was one of the pieces that I never fully took apart. So we'll go ahead and do that here. So what I'm doing now is I'm taking a quick look at what the damage is, and you can see some milk-like fluid has been spilled onto the keyboard. Jumping ahead a little bit, I'm getting out and getting ready to pull all the keys. This is a very, it's a kind of a tedious and time-consuming process, as you may well know. So we're going to speed it up here a little bit. Now the space bar, it should be noted, the space bar spring is very slightly different, so I kept that out and away from the other springs. It's almost not even visually distinguishable, but I kept it separate anyway, because it's a little bit stronger than the rest. What I'm going to do here is we're going to desolder the caps lock button, and it's a very easy thing to do. It takes just a couple of seconds. Just pull the wires away from the button itself, and that frees it up. Then next it'll be time to remove all of the small screws on the circuit board. The keyboard circuit board itself looked really good, very clean. Didn't look like any of the milk got down to where it might have done some damage or corrosion. So it's mainly just that broken post for the 0 key and that missing key. So what I'm going to do is now we have to get all the posts out so we can do a thorough cleaning, and where I'm just going to tip them over and and dump them out, because they're all exactly the same. And there we go. Didn't make a mess at all. It didn't make a mess of them at all. Now I can go about cleaning the keyboard tray there. And what I'm going to do is I'm just using Windex and some shop towels. And that cleaned it up very nicely. The milk-like substance came up right away. And now I've got to put all the posts back in to the keyboard tray there. I found it was easier to put this over a box, and then they just sort of fell into place instead of holding the keyboard tray. So now that all the posts have been replaced, we can replace the damaged one and put the keyboard circuit board back on. We can start putting the springs and the keycaps back on. Now that all the keycaps are back on, the keyboard can be reassembled back into the top of the case. And now the case has been fully reassembled. So the next thing to do is to try it out. So I've cleared my bench off, and this is a power supply purchased from Commodore Forever. It's a US power supply. And if you'll notice, it has a voltage and amperage gauge on it, which I thought was very useful. You can, of course, get them without it. It's a very well-made power supply. So we'll get everything plugged in. Right now, I'm just going to hook it up to one of the TVs, simply because I do not have a composite cable yet. That's most likely going to be in the next episode. You can, of course, buy composite cables. I plan on making a couple of different ones from scratch. We're going to plug in the Starfighter joystick, as I intend to play a few games. Now, the most exciting thing about getting this up and running is the fact that I can play my cartridge games now. I still have my original Jupiter Lander cartridge. It's one of the few things I was able to keep from my original Commodore system. And now that I have a working Commodore again, I can go ahead and play that. There is one cartridge there, the red one on top, I've never played. And, of course, another one is Jack Attack, I've never played. But this really does bring back some memories. This is one of the first video games I ever played. The object here is to land the spaceship. This is Jack Attack. This is one I've never played before. Not sure that I completely understood what needed to be done, but apologies for the angle of the screen. This screen is set up so that I can hook these types of systems in. I don't have the other screen configured for that, otherwise I'd be using a different camera. This is another one of my original cartridges called Visible Solar System. And essentially it sort of simulates flying around the solar system. You can look at planets and get their specs. Unfortunately, the information on this cartridge, of course, is about 30 some years out of date. There's a spot where you can actually scroll through the different planets and their stats, and Jupiter only had something like 15 moons or something like that, and we know today that it has many, many, many more moons than that, as well as Saturn only had so many moons. We've discovered many more in the 40 years since. So when I would play this cartridge when I was young, I would just pretend like I was in a spaceship and just kind of visiting other planets. It's not really a game of sorts as it is a learning tool. And I think the Visible Solar System and Jupiter Lander may have actually come with our original Commodore 64 that my dad bought back in the 80s. I'm not 100% sure on that. Next cartridge is one that I've never played as well. This one I picked up, I believe, at a garage sale. I recognized it as a C64 cartridge and picked it up immediately. It was just the cartridge, though. It wasn't anything. Nothing came with it. No instruction book, no anything. I think I picked it up for a couple of cents, maybe a quarter or something like that. Now that I've kind of gotten back into doing these types of videos and restoring old equipment and things like that, I'm kind of anxious to get out and do some rummage sailing. That might be taking up some of my weekends. But of course, there are other people that are looking for the same equipment than I am, so. With no instructions, it didn't take real long to figure out how to use this cartridge and so on. After all, it was intended for young kids. But I really appreciate you taking a look at this restoration. There will be additional videos to come on this particular Commodore. And hopefully I've got a few more games that I haven't been able to play. And we'll be able to get those played as well. But as always, thank you for watching.